Good afternoon to my podcast community. We're on the 80/20 podcast. You're probably saying, what's real estate investment have to do with 80/20? Well, if you stay tuned, we're going to put it all together. I'm Podcast Pete, and on the show here we have Robin. I met Robin a couple months ago, and so we finally got together. And so what he does is so important when it comes to really prioritizing where you're going to put resources, assets. And if you understand more about some of the reasons why you can prioritize better as you decide what to do. So Robin, tell our listeners who you are, what you do, and who you serve, and then we'll get into the podcast.
Sure, Pete. I am Robin Liang, and I have been a real estate professional since 2001 when I first became a landlord, and I've been a realtor since 2007. And one group that I serve are seniors and helping
Mhm.
seniors sell their homes.
Well, they do it over here because what happens is they want to be either closer to grandkids or they're tired of keeping the maintenance on the house. So they try to move from a big house into a small apartment. That's always a challenge. So
Mhm.
when you make that decision, how far in advance do seniors need to start planning when you're making these changes?
I would say ideally as far in advance as possible, maybe even up to a year. But
Mhm.
if you only have 60 days or so, that's something that I or others can help you with,
Right.
speed up the process.
Back in, I think you said 2001. What
Uh-huh.
what why did you get into real estate? What was the thought behind moving into that industry?
Sure. I read this book called Rich Dad, Poor Dad, actually, and you know this book,
Oh,
Happy.
yeah.
Yeah, and so it got
Robert
me
Kiyosaki, he's a legend. Yeah,
right, right. And I came from a real estate family too. I mean, I grew up, my parents were landlords, and it was just a natural fit.
mhm.
And I enjoyed it, and I still to this day enjoy it greatly, providing housing to others.
What would you say, that book, I played his game and,
Uh-huh.
read his book, and
Yeah.
I'll jump on a podcast of his. He always gave a different perspective to
Mhm.
thinking about how wealth creation happens. I mean, we tend not to get the education going through school, so we have to get it through other sources. So
Mhm.
when you're like on your journey, what part of that journey is educating people to understanding the landscape out there of creating assets?
Ooh, okay. Well, yeah, Charlie Munger, who's a partner, the late Charlie Munger,
Mhm.
um, of Warren Buffett. He said the hardest part is making that first 100,000, you know? So when you save up, you scrimp and save, and you build up that critical mass, and then
Mhm.
slowly wealth eventually there's compounding, and it's almost kind of automatic, you know? It's like one billionaire, he said, if you have $1,000 in the bank, who knows if it'll become 1,100. But if you have $100 million in the bank, for it to become $110 million is inevitable. So it's important to get that first initial critical mass, I would say.
What do you say? I have a person over here, and
Hmm.
she owned her house. She didn't sell it,
Hmm.
but then she had a person in her family that was out of town that was helping her with it. And we had the squatter type thing where
Ooh.
somebody moved in and they literally destroyed the house. What are you seeing out there? Is that a trend that has kind of empowered the people
Mhm.
out there to do things that they never really did before? Because I'm seeing it more than I ever have. Is that because of awareness or what?
I've heard about it. I haven't personally experienced it, and other investors I know they haven't. I do have this listing in Brookhaven now, and neighbors were saying, oh, there may be squatters in there because from inside we see like flashlights, but luckily there haven't been squatters. But I think this will be a short-term problem, honestly. I
Mhm.
hear like Florida and Georgia, they're putting in regulation to try to prevent this from happening. Yeah.
Yeah, you hear it in California. A friend of mine was a
Hmm.
Delta flight attendant, so he bought a
Hmm.
house out there, and of
Yeah.
course he's flying out there, and before he knew it, one time he going by to check on the house, and there was somebody in the house, and
Oh
he
boy.
go through because he wasn't there all the time. What
Right.
when you said, that first 100,000,
Hmm.
I agree. Getting started is always the toughest, and people want to wait. They want to say everything perfect. So for a person out there that says, you know what, I want to move into real estate investing or real estate in
Hmm.
general, how do you encourage them to kind of put that first foot in? Or what do you do
Yeah,
to help them?
I would start with good education and knowing the basics. And yeah, if they don't own a house, they should simply just buy their first house and know what it's like and maintenance and get familiar with taxes and insurance and maintenance. But yeah, you want to take that first step, and if you need to get comfortable, I mean, you may find a mentor or someone and see how their course of action and why they made their decisions. It's a very different landscape now than compared to when I started, over
Mhm.
20 years ago. But yeah, I would say the first thing is just to learn and learn the
Right.
literacy, learn the terms and such. Yeah.
Besides Rich Dad, Poor Dad, what books are you currently like impressed with reading that you could share with our
Hmm.
viewers?
Hmm. Um, I've read a few books dealing with mental models, and I think that's a great place to start with problem solving. I mentioned
Mhm,
Charlie Munger. He was very much into mental models and others too. And because I'm a big believer in first principles, Aristotle's first principles. You
mhm.
start with the very most fundamental problems, the problem, and really understand how something works. And then you kind of have to just engineer away from there to solve your problems that you face. Ray Dalio wrote a great book too.
Mhm.
I believe it's Principles is the title. Yeah, and that's a problem-solving methodology too. Um, I'm a big believer too in understanding how the mind works, and
Mhm.
I think everyone should get some background in CBT, which is cognitive behavioral therapy,
Mhm.
and just understanding how the mind works and how other people think. And it'll help you tremendously in life, I believe.
Oh,
Yeah.
you're exactly right. On my bathroom mirror is Charlie
Uh-huh.
Munger 8 Steps to Success. So,
Yeah.
one of his was he liked reverse engineering things,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
so I think that is it's when I heard that years ago,
Hmm.
I now kind of try to think about that as I look at
Hmm.
problems. I try to reverse them, and
Yeah.
it's amazing just when you're talking about mindset, you
Hmm.
have to change the way you think because most people don't think that way. But Charlie Munger did pretty good in his life. So, I mean, the
Yeah.
lessons learned. I love his lesson on keeping it simple. You
Yeah.
just in our society right now, where information is doubling every 24 hours, whatever it
Uh-huh.
is, it's a lot.
Right.
It Our brains weren't intended to be store like a data storage.
No.
And so, but we sometimes think of it as like, I got to keep remembering it's a thinking mindset. And I think
Mhm.
the more we think these days and disconnect from a lot of the things that are out there, because this other book that I Jim Quick, which I really
Mhm.
like,
Mhm.
he talks about, how little videos like TikTok and short form YouTube ones, it's basically conditioning us for short attention. So we're
Yes.
training our brain. If you're watching, like, just scrolling and scrolling and scrolling,
Mhm.
you're training your brain for little tiny the bits of memory. And we wonder why then we try to read a chapter, but we've
Yeah.
trained our brain to be like just these sound
That's
bites.
right. That's
And
right.
so, sitting down and reading a book or even watching, I have some podcasts I like, and I
Mhm.
like the long form because when they're giving you information to think,
Mhm.
you're not changing subjects every 30 seconds.
Right.
And I think
Right.
that people have been conditioned by that mindset of I've got to just watch these short videos, and all of a sudden the entertainment
Mhm.
becomes conditioning of your brain. What
Yeah.
what would you how do you handle all this short attention span, all this information that's coming down? What are you doing personally to because when I met you, you were pretty calm, and you were just you a lot of people you can tell are hyper, and they're just like
Mhm.
you know that they're taking in too much too soon or whatever.
Well,
What are you doing?
here's here's the thing. People have developed and evolved over time, and there's certain ingrained behaviors in people, and marketers, salespeople, the clever ones, they know how to manipulate you and get you to do what they want based on these things. And
Yep.
it's like people are going to try to fight years of natural selection and such to do something different, and it's difficult. So I mean, I always go back to the first principles, and I understand, the basics of CBT, of which one part of CBT is um, a thought creates a feeling, which creates an action. So a lot of news media, they will create events so that they can create a thought in your head, so they can cause you to feel a certain way, and so
Mhm.
they can ultimately get you to act a different way. So I'm aware of why they do this. So I don't feel that. Another thing is, when you know CBT, you understand, you can take it to the next level, and there's boundaries and personal boundaries you have with other people.
Mhm.
Um, People are, over many years, they've developed, they've naturally selected so that their boundaries aren't totally rigid, which is why I say public speaking, a lot of people are fearful of it, because in the long run, after several generations, this need to assimilate and fit in has helped them. So I understand these things, and I think that helps me a lot, and it helps me think clearly,
Mhm.
and go back to the fundamental basics. So, for example, as I mentioned, I serve the senior market, and
Mhm.
so I want to see how things are from the seniors' point of view and their families. So, seniors, they're going through this major life transition. They may have a
Mhm.
lot of possessions. Now they have to downsize their family. Oh my God, mother fell, and now she may have trouble getting accepted into an assisted living facility, and
Mhm.
just understanding what they're going through. So I try to take the fundamentals of what they're feeling, what's their scenario, and then I try to be, as Jeff Bezos says, you have to be customer centric.
Yeah.
Forget about what the competition's doing. You have to focus entirely on what your market, what your customers want, and that's what I try to do. So I try to see things and such, and I do a lot of persona building and such for that. Yeah.
Yeah, that is, we had a podcast this morning, and
Hmm.
that was brought up several times
Hmm.
in that when I'm saying like the focusing on the customer. I love
Hmm.
Bezos' thing about customer centric. I
Hmm.
used to listen to on a regular basis his yearly he does a presentation to stockholders, and it
Uh-huh.
was always centered around what are we doing for our customer? What are
Right.
we doing to make that customer, even if they
Right.
lost money, if it served their customer and everything that they do, that was okay, because if you don't focus on your customer, you're not going to have a business. So,
That
but
is
a
so
lot of
right.
people,
Yeah.
they think of all the other things. Like what we were talking about this morning was something as simple as, I tell you, Robin, I'm going to call you tomorrow at 2 o'clock and I'll get back with you. Bingo,
Hmm.
nothing happens. Next day, oh, Robin, I got caught up and didn't get a chance to call you back. Every excuse is equal. I mean, everybody has it.
Yeah.
They will say, hey, I'll meet you 3 o'clock tomorrow. No show.
Right.
What happened? Then they say, oh, I ran into traffic. Well, how long have you lived in Atlanta? Atlanta had
Yeah. Of course.
traffic 10
Right.
years ago and they have it now. So
Right.
everybody makes these excuses up, but the bottom line is, if you tell somebody you're going to do it, do
Uh-huh.
it. Don't come up
Yes.
with excuses like, hey, I forgot, or whatever
Right.
you want to say. But
Right.
I think those are simple things, but you know, simple as common sense is not always common practice. So when you
Absolutely.
said, I love that when you were talking about just our cognitive
Hmm.
functions,
Yeah.
because I think it's everything, understanding what people are doing to grab your time. I mean, the people at
Yes.
Facebook and Google and all these, they have the brightest people in the world studying the ability to
Yeah.
keep you on their platform, to attract your time.
Yeah, see, and that's another thing. There's a lot of things mixed in economics with natural selection as I talk about. So one thing is momentum. It's a simple mental model. They hook you in with momentum, get you with the baby step. Take a tiny little step, look at this, and then easily scroll to the next. Here's a simple
Yes.
trick. If you feel like you don't have enough self-discipline to go to the gym, pack up your gym bag and put it next to your front door or something like that. You see, you build momentum. Or if you don't feel like doing this long workout, well, or this long wet run, well, just run to that mailbox in your street 20 feet away, and then you build momentum. So these clever social network companies, they know how to use it to get you to do what they want. Yeah.
Absolutely. They're a lot better at it than anybody, and so you
Yeah.
have to be aware of that. What is
Hmm.
it, 60,000 marketing messages a day? The
Yeah.
brain is, like, inundated with all this stuff. So every
Hmm.
time you're on a social platform, you're having to
Hmm.
make a judgment call because,
Correct.
whatever it is, judge, is that good? Is it not? But that's telling your brain that you
Hmm.
have to start thinking that way because they want you to keep engaged
That's
with them.
right. That's
And
right.
that is so, and I know over here, I heard, I don't know if it's true, that the average person watches 4 hours of TV. And I'm going, dang,
Uh-huh.
that's a lot of time. And somebody
Right.
is conditioning, and entertainment's great, but if you're
Mhm.
just watching TV just to passively, watch something, it's not helping
Mhm.
you any because you're not
Right.
thinking, you're not engaged, you're just there like a zombie watching this
Right.
stuff. You
Yeah.
mentioned something earlier about boundaries. What
Mhm.
tell our viewers, I've studied it recently. Tell our viewers what you use, like how do you use the term boundaries in what you do each day and with people?
Sure. So I'll give you an example of boundaries. And if someone has some sales element in their job, they really have to be aware of this. So I do a lot of videos online, selfies online, and when I look on, say, LinkedIn, very few people do it. And I think it's a boundaries issue because I've seen constant contact. They'll talk about, they'll have marketing people and they'll say, okay, well, small business owner, what you need to do is more videos, and they say that's exactly the thing they don't want to do. Because they're very self-conscious or whatever. It's a boundaries issue. So
Mhm.
here's the thing you have to understand. um, there's only two things that exist. There's facts and there's fiction. So things like value, that's actually fiction. So self-value, self-esteem, what people think about you, these are fictional concepts. So
Mhm.
when you when you if you have boundaries and you're like, you care too much about what other people think, it's in a way it's kind of like nonsense because it's a popularity contest. It's all
Yeah.
based on fiction. Just I like to put it this way. If I mean like a house is blue, that's a fact. um Everyone in the world thinks that blue is the most beautiful color in the world. That's fiction.
Mhm.
Okay, so you have to kind of keep that in mind with boundaries with others, I feel. Yeah.
Yeah, you're right. We're kind of. I was in a class and they were talking about, saying no, and your no means no. It's like
Mhm.
putting that boundary up that you don't have to have a long
Mhm.
explanation of why you don't want to do something. People need
Yeah.
to respect that boundary. It's not
Right.
like, Robin, why can't you do it? Well, I can't. Well, why? Why?
Right.
I mean, that's me
Right.
overstepping my boundary because you said you can't do it. So I have to
Yeah.
respect that. And like, and if people are constantly stepping on your boundaries, it becomes a problem after a while, and I don't know that anybody we don't in our
But
school
yeah,
system teach
and
boundaries.
yeah, they
Boundaries 101.
don't. And boundaries, I think, is something that's evolved with people because it helps people assimilate better into
Mhm,
society. So, like, say I was like, I don't give a crap what anyone thinks. I don't
mhm,
care. I don't care how I look. I don't care what I say. I don't care about anything. Well, people are going to reject me and I will not survive. I can literally not, I can literally die if no one sells me food or provides housing to me. I can literally die.
mhm.
This boundary is a survival mechanism. So,
Right. Well, I love it, and I promised you that we wouldn't grab you all afternoon, so
mhm,
I wanna be respectful of your time. And our
mhm,
viewers, I'd love for you to dig deeper with me a little bit into boundaries because the reason why we move into a new facility here.
mhm.
When I moved in, I had some people that did not respect boundaries,
Right.
meaning, if somebody tells you something,
Mhm.
honor it. It's like
Yeah.
some people just never learned it. And then you get in a facility where you got 175 people there,
Mhm.
and you got to respect boundaries because
Mhm.
you're living in the same place. And so
Yeah.
a lot of people never they've missed that class. So
Right. Right.
need to dig deeper and we can talk further about it. But before we get there, tell our people, how can they get a hold of you, Robin?
Sure, yeah. Yes, the best way is to call me or text me at that number 678-576-4690. My email address is very easy to remember. It's robinrealestate77@gmail.com.
Mhm,
And yeah, I'm happy to help people with anything real estate related. In particular, I help seniors downsizing and transitioning to a new, smaller home, or dealing with
mhm.
any issues as their life changes dramatically as they get older.
Well, it's so important. When we moved 38 years ago to Atlanta,
Hmm. Hmm.
I didn't know anybody. I knew one person. I called him up. I
Yeah.
said, "Hey, moving into town. You got anybody you could recommend as a realtor?" Well, he gives me his part-time niece, and
Oh
you know
no,
what?
never use a part-time realtor.
A
Okay.
part-time niece who never
Yeah.
showed up at anything, but she showed up to get her check. So I
Yeah.
called him back and I said, "Listen very carefully. Never recommend your niece. Your reputation
Yeah.
is on the line." And that was the
Yes.
worst experience I have ever had, because when you're building a house, you want somebody on top of it that knows what's going on.
Yes.
Especially when I lived up in Richmond, it was like, going back and forth, you only have so much time. And if the
Yeah.
realtor is not your eyes and ears and,
Right.
you have all these years of experience in this town,
Mhm.
you know a
Mhm.
lot of people. So you're
Oh, yeah.
constantly calling resources and bringing in your
Mhm.
team of people. So
Mhm.
if you don't want that, don't call your niece just because you want to make her be part. I mean, I don't know why. I'm just not a fan of part-time. Part-time tells me no
Right.
time, because they're just
Right.
doing it on the sideline. And,
Yeah,
if you're
I
doing it
agree.
full-time, I'd ask the question, Robin, are you full-time? How long have you been
Yes.
in business? And the
Yeah.
fact that 2001 in full-time, I'd say that check, check. I would say that's two
Yeah.
good things there.
Yeah.
And because
Yeah.
you're fully engaged with what you're doing, and we appreciate that.
Yeah.
So first off, tell our viewers as we wind down, what would be the one thing you would want them to take home from our time together on the podcast?
Um, I would want them to take home, a lot of it just the key concepts I mentioned, start with the fundamentals, understand the difference between facts and fiction, and, have proper boundaries and understand why they exist. Yeah.
Mhm.
And yeah, and those are the main things.
Oh,
I will say one last thing. If you do
mhm,
have real estate needs, I can help you. And something that makes me a bit more unique, Pete, is I'm
mhm,
an investor as well. And that makes all
mhm.
the difference in the world. Because
Right.
one thing, when people list houses with me, I actually either fix, repair, or upgrade, or do some maintenance on their house. All my listings. Yeah. And I know
Mhm.
a lot of contractors that can provide discounts as well. But anyway, even if you're not looking to buy or sell a home, I mean, I know a lot of people, and I can help you out in any way I could possibly. I would love to help you out in anything real estate related.
Well, I want to bring you back just for this, because I forgot, when you think about a person in your position,
Hmm.
you have to develop relationships with so
Hmm.
many people, because you're right. You get this house and it needs a roof, it needs some siding, it
Hmm.
needs this, it needs that. You have
Right.
to have all those resources, and you don't want to be Googling and finding a
You
cold person.
don't.
That's the worst you could possibly do. You go to somebody you trust and say, "Help me find a person that can do this." And that's
Hmm.
all the difference in those relationships that you have out there, that You won't be burned by
Yeah.
someone that doesn't know you, and it's a first time meeting. Your reputation's on the line.
Mhm.
Say this guy, this roofer, can help you repair this. Not going to take you to the cleaner.
I could not agree with you more, Pete. I mean, there's there the contractors I know, they just wanna, like, put their head down and do what they love. They don't wanna spend time marketing or being on the internet, and I'll tell you the advantage of that is because when they have to spend money to advertise on the internet, they have to pass that cost on to you.
Yes,
And
totally.
plus, their business can really take off. So one day, if they're on the internet and they charge a certain price, when you need them again, that price, I've seen that price like double because now they're so popular on the
Yeah.
internet and with reviews, you know. So
And if they're really good, people are going to be referring them out.
yeah,
I'm
yeah.
not a fan of, because I was in that business
Hmm.
before a couple
Hmm.
5 years ago, and
Hmm.
now that I see, I really encourage people to develop those relationships,
Hmm.
develop people you can trust,
Hmm.
and have that network of people that you can, if you need things, you can contact them and get things done. Because if they know you and they trust you, you're going to get a whole lot better return on what you're trying to accomplish. So
Right.
thanks, Robin. I'd love to have you back. So
Sure.
and
It was a joy. Yeah.
definitely we're going to have you back on a couple, because I'm just, my brain's going in a couple areas. But
Yeah.
I want to thank you
Yeah.
for taking the time on our podcast, and we appreciate you taking the time.
Okay. Thanks a lot, Pete.
You bet.
All right.